Wait, hold up. Did the NCAA get one right? What is the impact of this decision for the Badgers football, basketball players? And I think it's a great move by the NCAA. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network, and I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. Let's talk about the impact of the latest NCAA ruling on our football team, basketball team, players most impacted. Let's talk about the ruling in general, why I love it, why there might be a little bit of an issue here and there, but overall, why I think it really fits for Wisconsin. Let's start here. So if you haven't been paying attention, totally cool. The NCAA, it's the D1 cabinet, which I guess is, I'd honestly be completely honest with you, that's a phrase I hadn't really heard, but they've approved the 5 for 5, which they've been talking about forever. We've talked about it just a couple times on this show too. Essentially what it means is you get 5 years to play 5 years after you graduate high school or you turn 19, whichever kind of comes first. So you can't get 5 for 5 if you come into college at 22. You're not going to be able to play until you're 27. You'd get 2 years at that point, right? Because that'd be 5 years past your 19th birthday. So international players, this impacts a lot of things. This is not just Wisconsin. This broadly impacts a lot of things, right? It impacts players coming over late. One of the things it's going to impact is a player on Wisconsin's own roster, a guy like Aaron Witt that's had, through no fault of his own, Aaron Witt has been an absolute warrior, but he's a guy that's had a ton of injuries and he's had multiple waivers. That waiver system's going to go away as well. You know, that they're not going to allow waivers except for military service, pregnancy, and missions, basically religious, if you go on a mission like BYU, that type of stuff. So if you're a female athlete and you're pregnant, if you have military service, but aside from that, you know, that's going to be one of the downsides is, you know, if you're a player that has a couple years of just catastrophic injury, think an Aaron Witt, you know, some of those waiver processes are going to go away. No, will there still be litigation? I'm sure. Will there still be some laws? I'm sure. Couple caveats here. If your eligibility basically just ended at the 26th season, you are not going to be eligible as of now to kind of get another year. I would anticipate a whole bunch of lawsuits over that one. I would quite frankly anticipate a whole bunch of players. I think they're already talking about it, who would petition for another year. Think of Braden Carrington type, who did not redshirt his first year. So he would have that 5th year available to him if he was in this current system that they're moving towards. I would anticipate a bunch of lawsuits there. Maybe they come to some type of middle ground where they grant a 1-year exemption to everybody that had just graduated. You do have to draw the line somewhere, right? You can't have a 27-year-old who says, well, listen, I played 4 years. I didn't get my 5th. So I'm going to file a lawsuit. No, you got to draw a line. I could see them going back retroactively 1 year and kind of grandfathering those players that just graduated into this. If you're on campus now, you're going to be grandfathered into this. And then basically all players coming into next year, this is the system you're going to play under. So athletes whose 4th year, again, we talked about the athletes who are here. Waivers will no longer be available to exceed eligibility. So what does this do? What does this mean? I'm going to get into the roster implications in a second of it. I like that we have moved away from the redshirt nonsense. The conversations of should we play a guy 4 games but not 5? I don't think those add anything. If a guy's good enough to play, to get his feet wet, to develop them, there's nothing like real reps. And in basketball, you remember the Zach Kinzinger discussion last year. And it's like, oh, we can't let him touch the court because he'll burn the red shirt. And then he plays a few minutes. Now, that's not good for the athlete or the sport. I think we've gotten to a point where there was a point where the red shirt year, you would come in and you would just develop. Your job was to get on campus. Your job was to acclimate. Your job was to learn how to lift weights. But those things are done at such a younger age now that you don't need an acclimation year anymore. A lot of these kids have trainers. They know how to lift the weights. They understand strength and nutrition. They understand workouts. They're coming to campus more and more ready to play and having to weigh, oh, should we keep them up? 4 games. We'll play them here, but not there. It just adds a silly layer of nonsense that I think we've grown past. So I think that's good. I don't think the sport or the athlete is served by trying to determine if we dare play Zach Kinzinger a minute but then we burn his red shirt. But what if we might need him later in the season? Then I wish we would have played him earlier, but we saved him because we were hoping to preserve the red shirt. I just don't think those conversations are that beneficial for anybody. This is simple. Simplicity is needed now in the college world. And I think we've moved into a direction where, okay, 5 years for 5. I love it. That the side benefit of this is you now have a 5th year for guys that, are not quite stars. They're not quite NFL, NBA guys, but they're really good college players. And that benefits everybody. That benefits the sport, the players, not just Wisconsin, a bunch of teams. But Wisconsin's one of those programs that traditionally has had those developmental guys. The Ohio States of the world aren't going to worry about these things as much because their stars are there 3-4 years and they go to the NFL. This helps schools like Wisconsin and Iowa and Washington. The schools that are going to traditionally have those guys for 4 or 5 years. And now you can let them play a little that first year, develop them, get them reps, get them experience. I think it's a really good rule. I don't think we need to worry about the nonsense of, you can't play a minute in basketball or you can play 4 games in football. So let's ration it out. Let's be really careful with it. And I think that's to some degree happened less and less anyway with the transfer portal. There's just more roster fluidity in general. So there's less of we're going to bank on this guy 5 years from now. But still, this just adds a layer of simplicity to everything. It tries to calm down the 25, 26-year-old, 27-year-old guys that are still playing college football and basketball. That's going to go away, right? You're going to lose those players and that's the intent of this. You're trying to curb some of the players that are going to be playing until they're 25, 26. And listen, Wisconsin's benefited from some of that. Absolutely, they have, like a lot of college teams. So you're going to have to adjust if you're Wisconsin. You're going to have to adjust if you're a lot of teams. But I do think in general, it's a beneficial rule for schools like Wisconsin, schools like in Iowa, schools that will develop and have those guys on their roster for a while. And we're going to speak to a couple of those guys specifically coming up. Let's take a couple comments here. See some people in the chat. As always, appreciate the heck out of you guys that are in the chat. Jan Volk, I agree with getting past the red shirt. Verbs, is this a done deal or just talks for now? It is a done deal as far as I can read, but these things are always subject to change, but it did pass. The NCAA has approved the new age-based 5-year eligibility model, and I don't know who would be out there that would have the power, the wherewithal, or the desire to challenge it. I think this makes a ton of sense for most parties. If I'm going to be completely honest, I think you'll get a couple individual lawsuits, which I talked about. I think a couple players specifically whose eligibility just ended. I guarantee you're going to see a bunch of those players sue for 1 more year because their argument will be pretty simple and it will make sense. If those players can get 5 years to play 5, why can't I? Again, this isn't going to apply to a guy that was a redshirt senior. He would have already had his 5 years. But a guy that's a straight senior, a guy like a Braden Carrington, those type of guys, I think you would see a potential lawsuit coming from. I'm sure Darren Heitner, the Miami-based lawyer who's in the middle of all these things, as always, will get involved there. So I can definitely see some lawsuits. But yeah, I think it's a done deal. M. Anderson says, I like it. Yeah, MB Anderson, good friend of the show. Nathan Hammond says, things change so much, I will believe it until I see it is set in stone. Yeah, for sure. But no matter what, this just feels like a step that most reasonable people can agree makes sense. I think it removes unneeded complexity from the sport. I think it streamlines the rules. I think it gets rid of if it works, a ton of just waiver nonsense. I just think it streamlines everything. It cleans it up. It's reasonable. You give players 5 years to play and you give them another development year if necessary. I think players will be happy with that. That's another year that they can get on the field, develop, grow into a potential NFL or NBA guy, or maximize their NIL earnings, right? Because quite frankly, you're not making a ton of NIL if you're redshirting. This gives a kid an opportunity as a impact freshman to come onto campus, play right away, and not have to worry about burning a year. You can go get your feet wet and not be penalized for it. I think that's a tremendous benefit for players and for schools. Now, It's going to benefit a ton of schools. It's not just like Wisconsin benefits from this, but I think schools like Wisconsin are going to benefit more than the Blue Bloods from a change like this. Keith Janke says, sounds reasonable. I think that's it. I think it's a really reasonable move forward. All right, we're going to take a quick second for our friends of the show. Come back and talk about specifically some hoops players that this really benefits potentially, and what it would have done for some past Badger teams. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. First, a quick second for our tremendous friends of the show over at Odoo. Excuse me for 1 second. Over at Odoo. Running a business, it shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of different systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform, from sales to accounting to inventory to marketing. All those things should work together like a good offensive line. Like your tackles should work with your guards, and your center should be right in the middle of it, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focused on growing the business instead of managing software. The best organizations know that success, it's not just about talent. It's about everyone working towards the same goal, and that's true in sports just like it is in business. And I talked about the offensive line. We're hoping for some more synergy this year. Mateo's coming in. It feels like that's all moving in the right direction. Everybody knowing their role and everybody on the same page. And that's usually what separates the good organizations from the great ones, which is where Wisconsin's trying to go. Great organizations win because operations matter. That's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. All right, let's come back into this. Specifically, how could this impact the Badgers for the next year, the year after? Let's start with hoops, because that's where my brain went right away. Because the Badgers really for the last, 20 years have always been filled with, fourth and fifth year guys. And there's been a ton of players that'll come in and they'll play early. You have to weigh the red shirt or not weigh the red shirt. You imagine if some of the guys that had to red shirt, if you were to allow them to get their feet wet, and what they would have looked like with an extra year of being able to play in games. But also just the players who, quite frankly, look at a Nolan Winter. Nolan didn't redshirt. He played as a true freshman. Think about the fact that, instead of gearing up for Nolan Winter leaving after this year, you could potentially have him for 2. Now, I think Nolan could go to the NBA anyway. But instead of having to go back to the portal, now you're an opportunity, and Nolan obviously would have to want to do this, but you have the opportunity now to take a guy like Nolan Winter, who's been in your program his whole life, loves Madison, massively talented kid, and maybe you could keep him for 5. Maybe you don't have to reload at that spot this year. Elmer coming over in the portal, big time get, shooter, scorer, two-way player, but maybe not the prototypical NBA guy. Like, he doesn't quite have the size to play defensively the spot he's going to need to play in the league. I don't know if he has quite the ball handling skills. He's like a perfect candidate to get another year for the Badgers. So instead of having to go to the portal to just constantly reload the revolver, right? Think about spinning that 6-piece and you just keep throwing bullets in there. You might be able to keep a couple of those in the clip now. You might be able to keep an Elmer for another year. And that's just massive. That's massive, because one of the things we've learned about Madison is when people get here, they tend to not want to leave it. Madison grows on kids. Now, you don't keep everybody, but what about a Nick Boyd? What if you could have kept him an extra year? Think about a Brad Davison. What if you could have kept a kid like that for an extra year, who is a culture setter, loves Madison, team captain, embodies everything you want on the court, but he was never going to go to the NBA. You can go play professionally in Europe, but you can make NIL money in the States now. That's the type of impact and difference you could get with a rule like this. You can keep those players for an extra year. Trey Autry. Autry's another one who didn't redshirt, right? Now you're able to potentially bring back 3 starters. You could go into the following season with Winter. We'll see, obviously. This is very projecting, but maybe you could go into the following season with Winter, Elmer, and Autry already locked up. And then Austin Rapp would gain another year because Austin Rapp didn't redshirt. So you could have Austin Rapp for 3 years. Now, again, this isn't unique to Wisconsin. There's going to be a lot of schools looking at this type of stuff and saying, my senior could suddenly have another year. But what is a little unique to Wisconsin is you go look at a lot of the other really big-time basketball programs in the Big Ten, the places like Michigan. Their kids get drafted earlier. You go look at an Illinois. They're just lost to Keaton Wagler to the lottery. They rely a little less on that fourth and fifth year guy than Wisconsin. Now, Michigan State is one. You look at some of their players who will be seniors and playing for them. That's a school that could benefit from this. But Wisconsin could be uniquely in a spot where this really helps them with just the way their roster naturally ages, the way they kind of play older players, more developmental pieces, guys that aren't tremendous athletes, guys that probably aren't bona fide NBA guys. You can keep more of those guys on your roster another year, keep the continuity, build the culture, and just develop them a little further. And it also allows you to play those guys early. Like last year, I think Zach Ginzinger could have played even more last year if you had no worry about the redshirt thing. And I think they probably knew this was coming, so maybe that was already factored into it. But I do think it's interesting. Dan says, I would like to see players rewarded with another year of eligibility if they haven't transferred in 2 or 3 years. Man, I don't hate that. Now, I just think you would end up, like a loyalty clause. The NBA has the ability to, go over their cap for homegrown talent. I honestly, I don't hate that clause. I just think it would add complexity. And when we're trying to like decomplex the game, we're trying to simplify all the rules and all the craziness. But honestly, I can see where you're coming from that. And as he says, we need to figure out a way to encourage less transfer portal so fans can actually learn the roster. Yeah, I don't hate any of that. Whatever you could do. Now, it's tough. Yeah, I definitely get where you're coming from there. It's hard simply because if players don't, there's always just going to be people in people's ears, I guess is what I'm going to say. There's always, somebody told me the other day, there's always an uncle, there's always a cousin, and these are still young men and women, right? And it's tough to keep players in place, but I don't hate the idea of finding some way to reward loyalty. I don't think it'll ever be with another year of eligibility, but I definitely get where you're coming from. Ferb says, is Jaylen Brown is obviously playing as a freshman, right? Well, he is now. Yeah, he definitely is now, but he was going to play anyway. I firmly believe Jaylen Brown is the type of guy you pencil in. What I've said with Jaylen Brown is I think it's a Johnny Davis type of career arc where he comes in as a true freshman, he plays right away, but it's maybe not the biggest role. He's coming off the bench, 15 minutes a game, something like that, and maybe more. Maybe I'm underselling it just a bit because I think defensively he has the ability to hold up in the Big Ten if he gets a little bigger. So, but yeah, now he's definitely going to play. Now, what this does, and Ferb is hitting on it, and thank you for the comment, and thank you for everybody in the chat and watching as always. But what this does, it removes any pressure from trying to preserve a year. So now if you think a kid can help you in a specific moment, a specific matchup, it might just be 1 or 2 games against a specific type of team you're playing. Now you have all the freedom in the world to put that kid out there and not worry about burning a year. Now, if you're a player, and we talked about this for years on the basketball side, players having to decide if I'm going to redshirt or not. There's nothing players want to do more than play. And there's nothing better for their development than playing. And now you're able to get those kids out there. They're not worried about burning a year. You can get reps. And again, this benefits everybody. It's not just a Wisconsin thing. But I just think it's a really valuable part of this process. And Ferb says, did Rapp redshirt? I don't think so. I'll go back and look, but I'm pretty sure he played right away. So that's another player that you would get another year out of this. All right, we're going to take a quick second here. Come back. Look at the football roster. There are some dudes, straight up dudes on this team that could really benefit from this rule. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. First, a quick second for our tremendous friends of the show. Also want to let everybody know we have that Locked On Everydayers program. The link is in the show notes. If you're interested, you can go check that out. You get ad-free episodes of Locked On Badgers. As always, want to say thank you for tuning into Locked On Badgers, making this one of your first listens every day, being a part of this community. Appreciate you so much. We have a bunch of great content coming up as always. Let's look at the football roster. So we went over some of the basketball thoughts. And again, you look at some of the players that this could get another year for. Big time impact guys for Wisconsin. On the football side, a couple of the seniors, and I would love to get another year of an Abu Sama. Sama didn't redshirt. So you potentially have Abu Sama for another year. Again, all this is fluid because you got to hang on to guys. But if Abu Sama, who wanted to come here, Madison's amazing. I think they're going to run the ball this year. He's probably going to be the bell cow. NIL's a thing in college now. The NFL has kind of been a little wishy-washy on him. That's the type of player that maybe he's your running back for 2 years now. Jalen DiMaggio, love the fact that you can maybe get him for 2 years. And this is where I think this rule is really beneficial, right? You have a guy who played as a true freshman at a lower level. So Jalen DiMaggio did not redshirt, but we know he's been productive. He's got great size, 11 touchdowns last year. It can take a year for you to adjust to a new level. So instead of this year kind of being that adjustment period where he comes, he plays, but it's a bit of a struggle at times. He's figuring it out. Now this year can be a bit of that influx season, and you can still have him for the next year. I think that's a tremendous use case for the applicability of a rule like this. 5 for 5 allows you to play a couple years at a lower level, come up, and still have a year or two to develop as long as you came in at 19, as long as you came in out of high school. Now, again, it doesn't, if you're go overseas in basketball and you play for 2 or 3 years, or you're just whatever. I mean, I don't even know if that would be applicable anymore anyway, but it's a different rule now. But for a player like Jalen DiMaggio, this could be a big deal. You could have him for 2 years. Marvin Burks Jr., right? That safety that they brought in from Missouri, very talented, very athletic, has to clean up some of the intent, the mental side of the game. We talked about it. But if he comes in as a good year for Madison, for Wisconsin, for the Badgers, that's a guy that you could have for another season as well. And then look at some of the true juniors, right? Styles Blackman, kind of a developmental offensive line. Suddenly he could have another year where you don't have to redshirt him this year. You could get him in, and that's a player that has turned some heads, that has earned some praise, but a player that you maybe wanted to redshirt, you wanted to be careful of this year. Now you could play him. You can play him all year on special teams, get him reps, get him opportunity. He would not lose that year, and then be able to step in and, really maybe be a part of this Badgers offensive line going forward. Guys like Shamar Rigby, Zion Kearney, Brian Jackson, Dylan Johnson, Darion Dupree, all true juniors. So all guys that potentially gain an extra year because they haven't already redshirted. A couple comments here. Pavel says 5 for 5 will make Cignetti fall off. I don't know. I'm curious why you think that, Pavel. Let me know why you think that. I kind of think like Cignetti is really, really, really good. I mean, unbelievably good. And I think the culture he builds is going to work almost no matter what he does. There was just a tremendous story about Nick Marsh, the Michigan State star receiver, coming over to Indiana. And I don't know if you guys heard this. This is an Indiana podcast, but I love this story. And Nick Marsh shows up for an Indiana practice this spring in gold sneakers, right? And this is a kid they paid $1 million plus easy, probably multiple millions of dollars. And Cignetti just aired him out. Cignetti's like, no, we don't do that here. Go away. And aired him out in a press conference. I think guys like that just have unbelievable ability to build culture and standards and get the most out of anybody that they coach. I think they're going to be fine anywhere, to be honest. Mitch James, Malachi Coleman. Did Coleman? No, Coleman played right away as a freshman. I don't think he redshirted. Yeah, Coleman's another one and Coleman's actually, Mitch, a really good example of this. Some players take longer. Malachi Coleman is immensely physically gifted. We know that. He's built in a lab to play receiver, right? 6'4", 6'5". He's a burner, but he's just taken him a while. He's moved around a little bit. It's taken him a while for it to click. This is a player that you want to play early to help him develop, get him reps, but might need that extra year. I think that's a tremendous tremendous point. Mr. October, good friend of the show, says Liam Danitz. Danitz has an interesting career coming from a lower level. I don't think it's possible. I would have to look into Liam Danitz. I'm not sure. But he's another one where if you could get another year. Yeah, if you could get another year for Danitz, I'd have to check on how old he is. But if you can get another year for Danitz where this is like oh my goodness, I took a massive jump in competition year, but I'm hyper athletic. Next year could be a breakout year for Liam Danitz if you could. I'd have to look into that one. That's a good pull out. MB Anderson says, if anything, this will help Sig. I just think he's such a damn good coach. Indiana won a national title. That's a sentence that if I had uttered in public 3 years ago, I would have been locked in a room with padded walls, and anything sharp would have been taken away from me, right? I would have been committed 3 years ago if I had said that sentence. So I just think Cignetti's a rock star as a coach. JB says, "Hey brother, USA Hockey wins Olympic gold. USA wins World Cup. Badgers win a natty. It's our year, brother. Let's go." Dude, I love JB. Great friend of the show. Yeah, certainly USA Hockey won the gold. I don't know about USA winning the World Cup. I don't know soccer, but I'm cheering like heck for it. Let's get him. Badgers win a natty. Listen, if the Badgers win a national title in football, we are going to host the biggest blowout party Locked On has ever seen. And we are going to, it's going to be absolutely epic. Dan says, would Cheeks get another year? Cheeks did not redshirt, right? So he played true freshman at UNC, if I remember correctly, came over, played right away here, played last year. This would be his senior year. I would have to check if Cheeks redshirted at UNC. I don't think he did. So Cheeks is another one. Now, one of the downsides to this, I want to be perfectly fair. One of the downsides to this, I don't think it's as big a deal anymore, but there was a time where you could let a player come to the program and just say, you got to work on development. Like the pressure of playing is almost off for some players because you're a project, because we think we're going to develop you. Now there's a little more pressure to play. Now, for some players where coaches, I don't want to say hide behind the red shirt year, there is going to be a little more pressure and stress test to some coaches and some players who are going to be itching to play. And you can't not play them because we're going to redshirt you. That won't work anymore. So coaches will have to navigate that. That will be a little trickier in some spots. Some players are going to be a little more frustrated by that. But I also, like I said in the beginning, I think players are coming into college more ready to play early than ever. I think players are more mature in terms of physical skills, in terms of the drills they do. They have trainers. They're lifting weights more. They're more specialized. They're watching more film. I just think players are more ready to play early, and that whole redshirt year is a little antiquated. Now, some players still need a year to develop. They need 2 years to develop. You're still going to get that. There's no rule that says you have to play the first 2 or 3 years. But I do think for some coaches, some players, there's going to be a little more pressure there. I could see that as a downside. Again, I think there's going to be some litigation for the players who just graduated, trying to get that 5th year, arguing that I should get my 5 for 5. But ultimately, I think this is a good move. I think it's good for Wisconsin. I think it's good for developmental schools. I think it's good for the type of players, specifically on basketball, that Wisconsin usually gets, which aren't usually the elite athletes, the guys that would leave early. I think they're going to be able to hang on to a couple more guys for that 5th year and develop them and keep them. I think that's good for Wisconsin. So ultimately, I think it's a good move by the NCAA. A rare one, but a good one. So let's see if we can get 2 in a row at some point from the NCAA, getting some stuff right on Wisconsin. As always, great stuff coming up this week. We got Payne Blasevich coming on. We're going to preview the defensive line. I'm feeling pretty good about it, to be completely honest. I think we might have a Badgers coach coming on in the next week or two, which I'm really excited about. A big-time Badgers commit, I think, is coming on this week, so that's going to be a good one. A lot of great content coming up, as always, on Wisconsin. Appreciate you guys and gals so much, and we will definitely talk to you tomorrow.